Are you ready for what will happen after September? Walmart and other major retailers are preparing for a series of changes that may shock you, from severe shortages to economic policies that could hit your wallet hard. What you do not know can leave you completely unprepared. Today we will delve into what Walmart and the government try to keep hidden and explain why it is important for you to be prepared. Stay with us, because the truth may frighten you. The first hidden threat is economic shortages. Currently, Walmart is facing serious challenges due to economic instability and potential severe shortages in the coming months as autumn approaches. Experts are increasingly concerned about disruptions that could severely impact the supply chain. These disruptions could cause widespread shortages of essential goods across the United States, affecting millions of households that rely on Walmart as their primary source of food and household items. Recent reports suggest that Walmart is taking precautions to address these potential shortages. The company is actively increasing its stock of key goods, such as canned goods, pasta, and rice. This step in accumulating essential goods is aimed not only at responding to current supply chain issues, but also at preparing for a potentially prolonged period of economic instability. This preparation highlights a deeper concern in retail: the possibility of a prolonged shortage of everyday essential goods, which could disrupt the usual way of life for many Americans. The reasons for these potential shortages are complex and varied. Firstly, there are significant global supply chain issues exacerbated by geopolitical tensions, natural disasters, and economic policies. For example, the coronavirus pandemic has already shown how fragile supply chains can be, causing delays and shortages that still affect markets today. This fragility is further tested by ongoing geopolitical conflicts that disrupt trade routes and increase delivery costs, making it more complex and expensive for retailers like Walmart to maintain their usual inventory levels. Moreover, economic experts point to the rise in raw material prices as a critical factor, contributing to these potential shortages. As production costs rise, suppliers may struggle to produce and distribute goods in the volumes and at the prices that were previously expected. This is especially concerning for products with complex supply chains, such as electronics, which require many components sourced from various regions of the world. As these costs rise, they inevitably pass on to consumers, leading to higher prices and a reduction in available goods on the shelves. Another serious problem is the labor shortage in various sectors affecting the supply chain. The transport industry, in particular, has suffered greatly due to a noticeable shortage of truck drivers and dock workers. This shortage means that even when goods are available, there are difficulties in their delivery. A shortage of workers for transporting goods from ports to warehouses and then to retail points like Walmart. This bottleneck can lead to delays and reduced availability of products, further exacerbating the shortage of necessary items. Walmart's strategy for stockpiling is also driven by the possibility of strikes at key U.S. ports. Disruptions at the ports could cause serious delays in the import of goods, worsening existing supply chain issues. This is particularly concerning for perishable goods or items with a short shelf life that cannot withstand long delays without the risk of spoilage. In this regard, Walmart prioritizes the accumulation of non-food items that can be stored for a long time without deteriorating in quality. Additionally, inflation is another pressing issue faced by Walmart and other retailers. As inflation levels rise, consumers' purchasing power decreases, making it difficult for them to acquire necessary goods. This decline in purchasing power affects not only consumers, but also retailers, as customers cut back on spending due to high prices. Walmart may face a decline in sales, complicating inventory management. Summarizing these factors creates a situation where Walmart must carefully balance the risk of surplus and shortage of stock. Excess inventory can lead to resource loss and unsold goods if consumer demand does not meet expectations. On the other hand, a lack of inventory may mean missed sales and unmet customer needs in times of shortage. This delicate balance explains why Walmart takes a proactive approach, closely monitoring global trends and adjusting its inventory management strategies according to any scenarios. The second point is the rising prices and the declining value of the dollar. The decline in the value of the American dollar became a serious problem, especially as inflation rose, affecting every corner of the consumer market, including Walmart and other major retailers. The purchasing power of the dollar has decreased by 25% over the last few years, meaning that significantly fewer goods can be bought for the same money than before. This decrease in purchasing power is largely due to a combination of factors, including excessive money printing by the government, rising national debt, and ongoing economic policies that do not promote sustainable economic growth. The impact of the dollar's fall is not just a theoretical economic concept. It has very real and tangible consequences for everyday life. For example, when you go to Walmart for groceries, you pay not only for the cost of the items themselves, but also for hidden expenses that have risen due to inflation, including increased production, transportation, and distribution costs. Producers and suppliers facing high costs for raw materials and transportation pass these expenses to retailers like Walmart, who then transfer them to consumers. Consumers may be surprised to see that the cost of even a small shopping basket has significantly increased today, due to accumulated higher expenses throughout the supply chain. Moreover, inflation has a snowball effect. When consumers notice rising prices, they may start buying more than they need in anticipation of further price increases. This behavior is called panic buying. This can create artificial shortages, which further drives up prices. Retailers like Walmart may find themselves in a difficult position, forced to raise prices not only to cover increased costs, but also to manage inventory amid unpredictable consumer behavior. The situation is exacerbated by external factors such as global supply chain disruptions and geopolitical tensions. For example, if a key supplier faces political instability or natural disasters, it can disrupt the flow of goods, leading to shortages and rising prices. The consequences of these violations are felt at the consumer level, where the combination of the falling dollar and limited supply leads to significant price increases. Walmart, as a major importer of goods, is particularly vulnerable to such changes, which can result in sharp price hikes on the shelves. Moreover, the decline in the dollar's value affects Walmart's pricing strategy. A weaker dollar means that importing goods becomes more expensive, as Walmart has to spend more dollars to buy the necessary amount of foreign currency to acquire products abroad. These costs are often passed on to consumers, leading to rising prices for imported goods, from electronics to clothing and certain food products. As the dollar weakens, these prices are likely to continue rising, hitting consumers' wallets harder. Inflation does not affect all goods equally, adding another layer of complexity for shoppers. Basic needs such as food and energy typically experience sharper price increases as the demand for these goods remains relatively stable regardless of price changes. Discretionary goods, such as electronics or clothing, can have more variable prices, but when essential goods become more expensive, consumers have less disposable income for other expenses. This change in consumer behavior can create a cascading effect, reducing demand for non-essential goods and potentially leading to economic slowdowns in other sectors dependent on consumer spending. For Walmart shoppers, this means that even if prices on some items seem stable, the overall cost of a typical shopping trip is likely to rise as inflation affects more parts of the economy. The range of affected products is expanding. For example, packaging, which may seem like a minor cost component, has also increased in price due to rising material and transportation costs. These hidden costs accumulate, contributing to higher prices faced by consumers at the checkout. Retailers are trying to mitigate the impact of the current situation by optimizing supply chains, negotiating better terms with suppliers, and implementing technologies to reduce operational costs. However, these measures have their limits, especially when it comes to economic pressures like the falling dollar and rising inflation. The reality is that prices will likely continue to rise, and therefore, it is important for consumers to stay informed and adjust their budgets. The third is the influence of California's economic policy on food availability. Being one of the most important agricultural centers in the USA, California produces a significant portion of the fruits, vegetables, nuts, and dairy consumed at the national level. However, recent changes in legislation and economic policy in the state create uncertainties that could disrupt this important supply chain. One major policy change is a new California law allowing non-residents to purchase housing without a down payment. Although this law is primarily aimed at solving housing issues, it has unforeseen consequences for the agricultural sector. With the increasing demand for housing, there arises a need to develop new lands for residential construction, which may lead to a reduction in areas available for agriculture. The reduction of agricultural land can significantly affect the state's ability to produce staple crops, thereby decreasing the overall volume of products that California supplies to the national market. Moreover, California's efforts to introduce laws against price gouging create additional complications. These laws are aimed at preventing excessive price increases during emergencies, but they also have side effects that can negatively impact the food supply chain. For example, farmers and suppliers facing rising production costs due to labor shortages, water resource restrictions, and other local regulations may find themselves unable to adjust prices to cover their expenses. This financial burden may lead to a decrease in production volumes, as farmers may decide to plant less or even leave the industry, further tightening food supplies. Strict environmental regulations in California aimed at reducing water consumption and protecting local ecosystems put additional pressure on agriculture. Water scarcity is a constant issue in California, and recent droughts have exacerbated the situation. Farmers are often forced to reduce the sowing of water-intensive crops or invest in expensive irrigation technologies, which can increase costs and decrease yields. As a result, the overall volume of production on farms decreases, leading to reduced supplies across the country. California ports also play a key role in the national supply chain for products, being an important entry point for imported goods. Any policy affecting port operations can have serious consequences. The cascading effect on food availability. The state's focus on implementing stricter emission standards for trucks and ships has led to increased compliance costs. These costs are often passed down the supply chain, leading to increased transportation fees for goods moving to and from California. The combination of a labor shortage in ports and among truck drivers has caused delays in the distribution of perishable goods, leading to spoilage and loss of products even before they reach store shelves like Walmart. Moreover, California's agricultural policy affects not only what is grown, but also how it is harvested. The state has some of the highest labor costs in the country due to increased minimum wage and strict labor protections. Although these measures aim to improve working conditions for agricultural workers, they also contribute to increasing operational costs for farmers. As wages rise, the costs of harvesting increase, which may lead to higher prices for consumers at checkout. For retailers like Walmart, which heavily rely on California's agricultural production, these increased costs may lead to a reduced selection on shelves and higher prices for consumers. The introduction of new taxes and fees, such as the proposed carbon tax aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, may further increase production and transportation costs. These economic measures, despite their focus on sustainable development and environmental responsibility, create a financial burden on farmers and suppliers. Increasing expenses often leads to reduced production capacity and rising prices for consumers, affecting the availability and cost of food across the country. Preparing for supply chain disruptions and strikes, the potential for large-scale strikes at U.S. ports poses a serious risk to the stability of supply chains across the country, with consequences that extend beyond delivery delays. Ports play a critical role in the global trade network, handling about 90% of all goods entering the United States. If a strike occurs, it could seriously disrupt this flow, leading to significant delays, empty shelves, and rising prices in various sectors, including food, electronics, auto parts, and others. Strikes in the ports usually arise from unresolved labor disputes, typically concerning wages, benefits, and working conditions. In recent years, tensions have escalated between dock workers and employers due to the implementation of automation, which threatens the job security of many longshoremen. The International Dockers and Warehouse Workers Union and the Pacific Maritime Association are negotiating contracts where automation is the main issue. If an agreement is not reached, a strike could halt operations at several ports on the West Coast, including major ports like Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Oakland, leading to difficulties in unloading cargo, causing huge backlogs of container ships and exacerbating delays. In anticipation of possible strikes, companies like Walmart and other large retailers are taking preventive measures to mitigate the impact. They are increasing stocks of non-perishable goods and essential items that can be stored for a long time. Walmart is also considering alternative routes and methods of transporting goods, such as air freight, to avoid potential congestion at ports. Although air freight is significantly more expensive, it provides faster delivery of high-value or urgently needed items. However, this option is limited due to the capacity and high cost associated with air transport, which are much higher than those of maritime shipping. Another strategy used by companies like Walmart is diversifying the supplier base by sourcing goods from a wider range of countries and regions. This reduces dependence on any single port or geographical area that may be affected by strikes. This approach helps not only to reduce risks associated with labor disputes, but also to protect against other disruptions, such as natural disasters or geopolitical tensions. For example, instead of heavily relying on Chinese manufacturers, Walmart is increasingly turning to countries like Vietnam, India, and Mexico, distributing its supply risks more evenly. Strikes can also negatively impact internal logistics, as delays in ports lead to congestion in warehouses and distribution centers. If goods get stuck in ports, the trucks and trains that usually transport products across the country may face significant delays, creating a bottleneck effect. This not only slows down the delivery of goods to stores, but also increases transportation costs as companies compete for limited freight services. The consequences can be serious. Costs are rising not only for transportation, but also for storage, as companies need to hold more inventory in transit and in warehouses for longer. Moreover, the economic consequences of a prolonged strike at the port can affect not only price increases and delays in deliveries. Retailers like Walmart may face shortages of essential goods, leading to customer dissatisfaction and lost sales. In the worst case, such shortages may drive consumers to turn to small retailers or online platforms with different supply chains, affecting Walmart's market share and profitability. Additionally, food products, especially perishable ones, are extremely vulnerable to such disruptions. Even a few days of delay can lead to spoilage, reducing the quality and availability of goods on the shelves. Moreover, it is necessary to consider the significant impact on the environment and social aspects. Prolonged strikes at the port can lead to increased emissions as ships wait to dock and unload, contributing to air pollution and negatively affecting coastal communities. The social aspect of the problem is also important. Strikers may face financial difficulties, and local economies reliant on port activities may suffer. The decline in economic activity and the complexities related to resolving port strikes involve many stakeholders, including unions, port authorities, shipping companies, and government agencies. Each of these participants has their own interests and limitations, making negotiations complex. For example, unions may demand higher wages and better working conditions, while port authorities and shipping companies must consider these demands in the context of operational costs and the need to remain competitive in the global market. Consumers should also be wary of potential price gouging in times of scarcity. When supply chain disruptions occur, some companies may unjustifiably raise prices in response to rising demand and reduced supply. This could lead to essential goods becoming unavailable for many households, exacerbating the financial burden due to rising prices and economic uncertainty. Monitoring prices and strategic planning of purchases, such as stockpiling non-food goods when prices are stable, can help mitigate these consequences. The Walmart Company, along with other retailers, also advocates for government intervention to resolve potential strikes before they escalate into serious disruptions. The government can play a role in facilitating negotiations or introducing temporary measures, such as the Taft-Hartley Act, which allows the federal government to intervene in strikes that could affect national health or safety. However, such interventions are complex and often controversial, as they must take into account the rights of workers and the economic needs of the country.